Hello everybody, today the next chapter in my Aston Martin DB9 ownership, the car formerly known as the DB9 as seen on Dad Cars. And today I'm here at Bamford Rose to drop it off for its first round of work. But before that begins, we want to give the car a thorough inspection and see if there's anything that I don't know about. Wish me luck. Before we take a look at my car in detail, I thought this was a great opportunity to sit with Mike of Bamford Rose and talk to him about the DB9 in general and some of the things that he will look for when he sees a car for the first time, as well as addressing a few common concerns from potential buyers.
Hi, I'm Mike and this is Bamford Rose and we're an independent Aston Martin specialist. Yeah, I really like DB9. It's a happy car. I think it looks timeless, classic, understated. You got a 6-litre naturally aspirated V12, which is a thing of the past now thanks to emissions regulations. It's an alternative for the owner that didn't want a smaller, sportier car. The DB9 is a really, really good GT cruiser. Quite happily go to the south of France, south of Spain in it, and feel comfortable and enjoy the journey, and that's what GT cruising is all about. I first started working for Aston Martin in the year 2000. I'm a petrol engine performance development engineer. Did the performance development of this engine, 450 horsepower, then going on to the 470 horsepower, and then 510 horsepower for V12 Vantage and DBS. I left Aston in about 2010. I saw an opportunity for a garage just like this, an independent Aston Martin specialist, because at that time Aston was selling quite a few thousand units per year, but they didn't really have an independent network for the new era, the VH platform cars. That leads us to where we are today, 13 years later. Yeah, so we often do pre-purchase inspections for owners that want confidence before buying. Sometimes I say that if you buy from a franchise dealer, hopefully that is going to give you the best car and there should be nothing fundamentally wrong with it. Then those Astons that get sold with the timeless warranty, it's okay to do a post-purchase inspection, because you'd have hopefully thought that if you did find something that they'd missed straight away in a post-purchase inspection, they'd be able to take care of it if we identified it. So the pre or post-purchase inspection is exactly the same as a service routine. It's the same inspection and it's looking for anything on obviously chassis, brakes, suspension, engine, electronics. That's important to check on an Aston, just checking that everything is working okay and nothing needs replacing. It's quite important to do that because sometimes these cars can suffer with deferred maintenance. For whatever reason, owners choose not to do maintenance at a set time. The car gets sold. It's an important thing to think about in the Aston world. Most cars with problems get traded rather than getting fixed. And you certainly don't want to be buying a car that looks pretty on the outside and the interior, but underneath is harbouring some quite serious problems, because these cars can rack up big repair bills pretty quick. So the most important things to check on a DB9 will be the engine. There's a couple of issues that they can suffer from. I won't go into them in finer detail, but the breather circuit, so this is where normal breathing gas carries over a little bit of oil, and then gradually the engine consumes its own oil until it starves the rear main big end bearings. The other issue is misfire, and this is nothing specific to this engine. Every single engine after a while is going to misfire from spark plugs or coils, and that misfire can fail the catalyst. On the V12 engine, the catalyst is so close to the engine that the ceramic debris can get ingested back up into the engine and fail the engine. So we want to check that there's no misfires. So that's engine. The gearbox, the ZF 6HP gearbox, is pretty bomb-proof. Just going to check that there's no gearbox whines, no diff whines, because then if there was something wrong, that would be pretty expensive to fix. Next is wishbone arm suspension, radiators, aircon system, and you know, that leads you to a complete health check for the car. We're on it for about 3 hours, so with a VAT it'd be £350. Probably if you average out minor services with major services, put a set of tyres, put a set of brakes in it, I think you're going to come out at about £2,000 a year, maintenance and sort of cycle components. There's going to be the odd breakdown, and that would be additional. Fundamentally, if you get a really, really good car to start with, that car is going to look after you, and that'll be a great ownership experience, and you'll have very little hassle with that car. And this is why it's really important to get a really, really good inspection at point of purchase. You know, a generic inspection from a non-specialist garage isn't going to tell you too much above what putting the car in for an MOT would tell you, whereas an inspection done by a specialist like us, or any independent in the Aston world, is going to really go into depth about the common gotchas and then make sure that you're not purchasing a car that's harbouring those issues.
Though today we're mostly talking DB9, I would expect for many that the smaller V8 Vantage is the Aston Martin they'd want to buy first, and a more natural progression from a sports car like a 911. Considering the two are based on similar underpinnings but with different powertrains, I asked Mike if there was a big difference in the running costs come service time.
That's a good question. There's no significant difference in outright maintenance costs, but there is a difference if something goes wrong with the car. The DB9 will cost more to repair, the more serious the problem. But it's something that I discuss quite a lot in the social media I do. If you're trying to identify an Aston in the range which will give you the least amount of grief, it's a 4.3 V8 manual. The engines are bomb-proof on those, the gearboxes are bomb-proof, there's no sports shift system to go wrong, there's no touch-sensitive dash, there isn't a convertible roof. So on a 4.3 V8 manual, you pretty much can chart your ownership costs along the lines of basic servicing and tyres and cycle parts. It's interesting, you know, we've been doing this for 13 years now, how the course of our business has changed. Because even 10 years ago, when we were 3 years into this and the cars were 8 years old, you know, the word restoration only existed in DB garages, not this new era garage. But now it's a very common pattern of work for us to do rear subframe. The tubular steel subframe can corrode, so they need shot blasting and powder coating. And then you've got a lot of the other steel components on the underside, brackets, handbrake cables, brake pipes, they all need replacing as well. And also when you strip the car, suspension arms, dampers, so there can be quite a repeatable package of work where it is like more or less a complete underside restoration, and that is becoming more and more.
So then, so far so good, but Lamborghini Gallardo, Ferrari F430 and Toyota MR2 owners will certainly be concerned when they hear about a car that has potential catalyst issues. What exactly is going on with the Aston Martin, and is it something you need to be concerned about? Let's take a closer look.
Well, yeah, the exhaust issue, it can be an issue. This is the factory manifold. It does look like it should be on a chassis made by Massey Ferguson, but it is on an Aston Martin. The problem with this is that this catalyst is so close to the exhaust port. This runner length here is the shortest, really, really short. Now, cut a long story short, what the factory did is they needed to reduce nitrous oxide emissions to pass the emissions legislation. They didn't want to have external EGR, which is a pipe that comes out of the manifold, goes back into the inlet manifold and flows spent gas back into the inlet manifold, and that spent gas reduces combustion temperature, and a lower combustion temperature reduces nitrous oxide emissions. So what they did, because they didn't want the external exhaust valve and a software strategy to measure it, control it, there was a huge valve overlap set on the inlet and exhaust cam, and what that does is suck back up a very precise controlled amount of spent gas. In terms of the combustion intake, it's less than 5% of combustion charge is spent gas. So The spent gas gets sucked back up into the chamber, and this is what we call internal exhaust gas recirculation. It works in exactly the same way. So they cured their emissions problem by doing that. Unfortunately, the catalyst, when there's a misfire, so a spark plug needs replacing and it misfires, or the coil erratically controls spark and it causes a misfire, then you've got a certain amount of unburnt fuel which burns on the face of the catalyst. Over time, cruising down a motorway, small amount of explosion going on the face of the catalyst, that erodes the catalyst. It eventually fails it because it's a honeycomb matrix and it's only supported around the outside. So as soon as you start to nibble bits of the outside of it away, it loses its structural integrity. That causes the catalyst to completely fail. You've got chunks of ceramic. Unfortunately, it's cost down ceramic brick and not metallic foil brick. This problem wouldn't exist if the catalyst was metallic foil. So the ceramic chunks break up, that big valve overlap sucks the gas and the chunks back up into the chamber. Then you've got ceramic debris that gets worn past the piston rings and then drops into the oil and causes damage to camshaft journals. So in normal circumstances, when there's no misfire whatsoever, combustion is okay, you're never ever going to fail this catalyst. This is now a problem, 10, 15, 20 years down the line when you are going to get a misfire, and now because of that sensitivity, the system is at risk of failure. So this is one of the big things in a pre-purchase inspection or each annual service, that you need to check that you've got no misfire and that this catalyst is not being put at risk. Two solutions to overcome that problem. Preventative maintenance. We can take this exhaust manifold, we can cut the weld seams, we can remove the catalysts, we weld it back up, put it in the car basically with the primary cat delete, remap the engine management system so there's no error lights, and then that's the problem gone away, there's no risk. So at this moment, Aston Martin aren't remanufacturing engines, and supply of cranks, pistons, it's all quite tight. So if you do a preventative maintenance action of avoiding the problem, ordinarily the engine would never fail. So if you take away one of the reasons why it could fail, then it just ensures that your engine plods on forever. So that's a primary decap. You'll get about 30 brake horsepower from doing that. So, it's preventive maintenance and you're getting a performance increase. It's not all about the peak power increase either. The on-throttle responsiveness, which is especially important with a sports car from 2, 3, 4,000 RPM, is going to be a lot more electric, energetic with these primary cats gone. The next thing that we do, it's quite indulgent. This is our headline modification. So now this is tuned equal length primary pipes. We arrange our primary and secondary pipe design so it still retains the Aston burble. It's not like a tuned Ferrari. And with high lift inlet cams, ECU remap, high flow secondary cats, we can get about 80, 90 brake horsepower increase out of this upgrade. Never, ever, ever in 13 years of business has one of my own customers failed their catalysts. Never. Because at each annual service, it's a very detailed job with the laptop looking at misfire, at idle, just off idle, out on the road, and any traces of misfire which would be significant to put the catalyst at risk, then I inform them, hey, you need to spark plugs, coils, whatever it is that we need to change. All the cars that I get delivered to me with catalyst failures is because of a lack of care at service, really, that the misfire was never detected and it was left long enough to run. In terms of trying to identify in percentage terms to all the cars made, it's minuscule. But the thing is that if this problem happens to you, the repair bill could be so significant that it is just the wise thing to do the preventative maintenance action of removing the primary catalyst. When we do a primary decap, the way in which we do it, this manifold will look the same, and we up-spec the secondary cat so it will easily pass MOT. So if someone wanted to go down the path of preventing this problem from happening but not being offside in future tampering legislation, then our primary decap with the high flow secondaries does that.
So hopefully that has helped allay a few fears about what I know is often cited as one of the biggest problems with the DB9. But now it's that moment that all luxury car owners dread, the first time on the ramp. In fact, even the former owner, Ben from Dad Cars, who is here today, has never actually seen the underside of the old DB9. But what's Mike gonna find?
Well, the good thing is that it got put on the ramp and the undersurface trays came off without a load of fixings being stripped off in the process, which is a really good sign that maintenance has been good, because the trays have been on and off and the car's actually been looked after. So that's one good sign. I'm just looking around this car instantly. As soon as I put a car on a ramp and have a look round, you can get a feel for a car. And this just looks original, but really well cared and kept for. I really like it on engines like that, where you've got sort of thousands of miles worth of sort of grime on the bottom of them, so you know it's not been cleaned up, but yet this is completely bone dry. So that's one good sign that the engine sump and front cover isn't leaking. Aircon condenser and radiator, they all look good. They're common corrosion points. Aircon compressor itself, that's all bone dry. All the rubber pipes are good. All the suspension components, wishbone arms, that all looks good. You know, bushes can sometimes push out, but these look quite good. Moving back, common issue would be the transcooler pipes. They look like they're not leaking at all, and they look original. It's just this car just looks like really original. It's quite good. Not really a lot going on in this centre section. We check for corrosion on the brake linings, but that all looks good. Coming back to the rear frame, I mean, this is a common restoration point now, but this is just normal surface corrosion. You know, the weld joints are not being eaten into by corrosion, so this subframe's got a good few years left in it.
Could you just point out for people that wouldn't know what constitutes the subframe?
So this is a tubular steel rear subframe. Ideally it would have been an aluminium subframe like the front subframe is, but unfortunately they made it out of steel. And it houses lower wishbone arms, upper wishbone arms, and the gearbox. So when corrosion starts to bite, you know, we've had it where you can take the car apart and you can literally with a hammer sort of tap those brackets and they fall off. Got a rear anti-roll bar. Everything on this car is quite minimal corrosion, so it's really good. We look at handbrake cable. That can sometimes seize up. Gearbox has got no leaks, which is good. Nice to see that the diff plug has got a paint pen mark on. That's obviously not factory, it just means someone's changed the diff oil. Yeah, it looks like it's been really well cared for, this car, in a prior life, so it's really good. This is what we want to see, because what we don't want to see are cars that have got a load of deferred maintenance and it really causes the new owner a headache shortly after purchase, which isn't the ownership experience that you want. So the one thing I've spotted on this car, which is a bit upsetting, because prior to knowing this myself, I used to advise a lot of customers to seek out the glass key start cars because they're 470 horsepower, but those cars were built, or supposed to have been built, with the Bilstein dampers, which are fundamentally better handling, better driving dampers than the older Dynamics dampers. But this is a sport pack car, and from a couple of my customers, I have found out that they ran out the Dynamics Sport Pack into the first build 470s instead of them being Bilstein Sport Pack dampers. And the reason why this is important is because the Bilstein dampers, they soak up the low speed bumps really well, so you get a nice comfy drive. Cabin composure is good. Yet when you tip in, they really sharpen up and follow quite a tight arc. The previous level Dynamics dampers fitted to V8s and DB9s, they all suffered with quite low speed, crashy ride, yet there was a lot of body roll and a couple of other sort of negative handling traits. If you set the car up in a long sweeping bend, 70-ish mile an hour, you could get what we call the pogo, which is the car sort of front to rear starts pitching instead of it being sure-footed going through the corner. So hunting out a Bilstein damper car was like really important, and it's just on these cars where they were Dynamics Sport Pack, the stiffer nature of the Dynamics damper sort of compounds that original problem. It was already crashy at low speed. This is even more so, and you probably notice it on a few corners out on the road. You'll be going through a series of bends, and you probably notice the traction control light flicker, and you think, well, it shouldn't have come on for the manoeuvre that I was just doing, and it all goes back to fundamentally the dampers being too stiff, and the cars don't handle the best. I think Aston Sport Pack around this era got a bit of a bad name for being too stiff, which they sorted out on the, say, 2012 cars, especially when they went to electronic adaptive damping, because Sport Pack on an Aston is now fundamentally good. It's just there's this very small window where it was Sport Pack Dynamics, which is too stiff. So yeah, it'd be really good to get some Bilsteins on this car and get it handling well.
And with that, I left the DB9 to Mike and his team. We had a filming commitment for the week after, so I gave him a strict turnaround time of just 6 days, and I also handed him my snag list of little things I'd noticed with the car that weren't quite right. Finally, he asked if he had my permission to tinker with the car during the process as he saw fit, and naturally I said yes, although it wasn't until pickup time I actually found out what this really meant. Stay tuned for the next instalment in the resurrection of the DB9, and for now, thanks for watching, and thanks to Bamford Rose. Bye bye.